Hey budget gardeners, Vita Loca here. Join me today as I show you how to make your own seed starting mix. So let's go. I like to make my own seed starting mix, and the biggest reason is it saves me a lot of money. I started making my own seed starting mix a few years ago, and the reason was that I started looking into how much it cost me every time I bought a bag of the already mixed seed starting mix. It was pretty expensive, and for the volume of plants that I personally like to grow, it was definitely cheaper for me to make my own mix. Also, I have more control of what goes into that seed starting mix. I did a lot of research. I looked on the internet. I especially looked at local college extensions for gardening. And I wanted to find out what a lot of universities, starting with my local university, suggested when it came to making your own seed starting mix. And I was surprised. It's actually very simple to make your own mix. There are really two main ingredients that you need when you're making your own seed starting mix. The first thing that you need is either peat moss or coco coir. And really, that's up to you and what you feel comfortable using. So do your own research to see which one you prefer. I've been using peat moss for a number of years. It's worked for me, and it's pretty cheap when you buy it in a big bale like this. I bought this from a local garden center, and it lasts me a long time. What I really like about peat moss, or if you use coco coir, is that you can then use it for your own potting mix. And I have a ton of pots that I fill up in my garden for hanging baskets, window boxes, pots on my porches. So I like to be able to reuse this material for different purposes. So for seed starting, this is perfect, the peat moss. And then the second thing that you need is something else that's going to help retain the water or the moisture, and that would be vermiculite. I also like to buy that in bulk, and I bought that off of Amazon. However, I know that certain shipping companies, such as Uline, sell it as well. So definitely do some comparison with pricing and see what's cheaper for you. Worth mentioning is that when you do your seed starting indoors or outdoors, you want to make sure it's a soilless mixture. That's really important. And also you want to make sure it's nice and fluffy. The biggest thing is you want to make sure that it can retain that moisture. The seeds need that. It's very important. So peat moss combined with the vermiculite will help retain that moisture. So just keep that in mind when you're making your own mix. I also did a lot of research when it came to how much of each would I need for making my own mixture. And what I found to be the best mixture based on my research, as well as when I made my own mix last year, was 1-to-1 parts, meaning 1 part of the peat moss to 1 part of the vermiculite. Now, when we talk about parts, it's basically whatever you're using for your container to scoop up the ingredients. And I like to just use something very small and simple. So some sort of little bowl like this. And I'm going to be showing you how I make this mixture. But just keep in mind, whenever you're looking at anything that has to do with parts, it basically is talking about the container that you're using for scooping your ingredients. Also worth mentioning is during my research, there were 2 other ingredients that you can add to your seed starting mix that are optional, but I've never added them in the past. One of them I'm going to add this year. One of those 2 ingredients is superphosphate. Superphosphate is something kind of like a fertilizer that you could add to your seed starting mixture. However, I don't plan on adding that to my seed starting mixture. My research found that superphosphate has some sort of fertilizer that you could be adding to your seed starting mixture. Typically, when you're starting seeds, the seed itself has enough in it to basically germinate and start the seedling off to a good start for the first few weeks. Then I like to add a liquid fertilizer to fertilize my little seedlings. I usually use Miracle Grow. So again, I highly encourage you to do your research, see if superphosphate is something that you want to add to your seed starting mixture. Now, the other thing that I'd like to add to my seed starting mixture going forward, but I don't have on hand right now, is lime. Lime helps reduce the acidity of your mixture. Peat moss tends to be on the slightly acidic side. So the limestone brings down the acidity. And while I was doing my research, I looked at certain seed starting mixtures that are out there on the market. And I noticed that a lot of the seed starting mixtures had a combination of the peat moss, the vermiculite, as well as the limestone. So I do plan on adding that as well. And I'll be popping up on the screen about how much I plan on adding to my seed starting mixture. But keep in mind, it's a very small amount. When it comes to making your seed starting mixture, you just want to be a little safe when you're doing it. The peat moss can be dusty and the vermiculite can be dusty. So you want to do it in an open area or you want to do it outside. And then the other option is you can wear a face mask. Just be sure you're safe when it comes to that. And also, I do like to wear gloves when I'm making my mixture. And you also want some sort of a container to hold your seed starting mixture. It can be a big bin, a smaller bin. And what I like to use is, I personally like to just use something small like this. It's easy for me to carry. And also with totes or some sort of a bin, a lot of times you have a cover, and I like to just cover it just to keep any other material from getting into here. So I'm going to go ahead and take you in for a closer shot so I can show you how I go ahead with mixing these two ingredients. So I'm going to start with 1 part of my peat moss. And then I'm going to add to it 1 part of the vermiculite. And I just want to show you what it looks like when I mix it together. And sometimes you'll find chunks of the peat moss in here, and you can just go ahead and just break apart the chunks with your hands. And I like the vermiculite. I like that it's fluffy. During my research, I found that some sites said you can also use the perlite. I do have perlite on hand. However, I like to use perlite when I'm doing a potting mix. And I have a video that shows you how to make your own potting mix. So I will put a link to that down in my description. So you can see that it's a good mixture of half the peat moss with half the perlite. And again, you can play around with this mixture. If you wanted to add a little bit more of the peat moss, you could do that for sure. But this has worked for me. And so I only showed you a 1-to-1 part. But if I wanted to, what I could do next is I could do, let's say, 4 parts of the peat moss. And then I would do 4 parts of the vermiculite. And it's amazing how long and how far all this peat moss and the vermiculite actually goes when it comes to making your own seed starting mix, as well as making your own potting mix. And here's a chunk right here. So again, just break it apart. And what I'll end up doing is I will end up filling this container almost to the top. And I do have videos showing you how to sterilize your seed starting mix. And that's important because if you don't do that, you have a higher chance of getting fungus gnats. And if you've ever had fungus gnats, trust me, it's not fun. So there are a number of steps you can follow to avoid getting fungus gnats. And one of them is sterilizing your seed starting mix, because fungus gnats find their way into mixtures either that you buy or you make, and they lay their eggs. So you don't want that when you're starting seeds indoors. Okay, that looks pretty good. I'm so excited that I finally have some seed starting mix to start some plants, because begonias are coming up and I'm going to be starting those within the next day. So be sure to check out that video. Anyway, I have added some more mixture in here, and I have a good amount to get me started. And it barely made a dent in the bag of peat moss as well as vermiculite. So you can see, I mean, if you were to go out and buy a bag or two of this, it would cost quite a bit of money. But I can make so much more with the mixtures of the peat moss combined with the vermiculite. And even if you're not starting a ton of seeds indoors, let's say that you still have a bunch of pots outdoors that you're going to be filling up. It's not a waste to do this process because you can still use these two ingredients, and also you will be adding a few other ingredients to your mixture for your potting mix. So personally, I think it's very worthwhile to do this, but definitely do your own homework, your research, go to the store, calculate how much it costs for your own seed starting mix if you were to buy it already made versus buying each of these bulk ingredients. But typically speaking, buying in bulk will be cheaper than buying individually, especially if you need quite a bit of it on hand. So I hope that this video was helpful for you. I'd love to know, please put a comment below if you've ever made your own seed starting mix or your own potting mix. And what did you find? Did you use a different mixture? Have you changed it over the years? I'd love to hear from you. Until the next video, make it a great day with gardening.